Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farokh Pittafi. Once again, we are going to talk about Pakistan's economic situation, particularly vis-a-vis FATF. Remember, we have been talking about this issue for quite some time, ever since Pakistan came into the grey list, so to speak. And this time again, FATF is meeting, and the word has it that Pakistan is being assessed, and there is a good chance that Pakistan may come out of the list and come to the white list. We are going to talk about this, the chances, what are the matters of compliance, and how effective is everything going to be in coming days. And then, of course, what is going to be the impact of either cases if Pakistan stays in the grey list or Pakistan comes out and becomes whitelisted. We are going to talk about all these matters. Before that, there are two things that are important. One, I have to read two quotes of the foreign minister. I'm sure that it is going to be put up on the screen. I'm just going to start reading. We had been given 27 points in the FATF action plan, out of which work on 26 has been completed. The Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Shah Mahmood Qureshi Sahab, has stated. And then he has also said, India wanted to use the forum FATF for political purposes, but should not be allowed to do so. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi. And before we actually come to the panel that I am joined with, let us first watch a report that was prepared by our team. Let us watch it, then I'm going to introduce the panel as well.
The Financial Action Task Force is a global watchdog for money laundering and terror financing. Pakistan is currently part of the list of jurisdictions subject to increased monitoring maintained by the FATF. Pakistan was placed on FATF's grey list in June 2018. The country was given a 27-point action plan to curtail money laundering and terror financing by the end of 2019. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi underlined that India was using the FATF forum to conduct continuous propaganda against Pakistan. Foreign Minister Qureshi said that we had been given 27 points in the FATF action plan, out of which work on 26 has been completed. Pakistan's performance has been praised by the international community, including the European Union. Under the German presidency of Dr. Markus Player, delegates representing 205 members of the Global Network and observer organizations, including the International Monetary Fund, the United Nations, and the Egmont Group of Financial Intelligence Units, will take part in the virtual meeting of the FATF plenary. Earlier this month, the Asia Pacific Group on Money Laundering improved Pakistan's rating on 21 of the 40 technical recommendations of the FATF. As a nation, we hope and pray that this time Pakistan finally convinces the international community and secure removal out of the list of jurisdictions with increased monitoring. The watchdog will publish its decision on June 25th at the closing of the meeting.
Hopes are there, and let us see how things are going to pan out. But let me introduce the panel I've got in the studio. In the studio, joining me, Dr. Usman H. Chauhan, who is Director Economics and National Development, Center for Aerospace and Security Studies. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, for being part of the program. The second expert who joins us is Dr. Waqas Ali Kausar, who is an expert on foreign affairs, frequents this program. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, for being part of the program. We will be joined by two other guests, one on Skype, one on telephone. I don't know whether they have joined yet, but let me read the names of the guests who are going to join us. Ahmed Hassan Mughal, former President, Islamabad Chamber of Commerce and Industry, joins us. I can see his picture. That means he has joined. Thank you very much, Mughal Saab, for being part of the program. Later, we will also be joined by Dr. Abid Qayyum Salari, who is member, Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, and he is also the executive director of Sustainable Development Policy Institute. So I thank all the panelists. Let me start with Dr. Chauhan. Dr. Chauhan, what are the odds that Pakistan comes out of the grey list?
Sir, I would say to you that the odds are fairly good this time around that we may come on the white list.
Okay.
The reason is because there has been so much progress on so many fronts, particularly on the legislative side.
Yeah.
But you can never be 100% sure that they will be persuaded. The jury of your peer countries and their financial monitoring units would be entirely convinced. So you can never be 100% sure.
Right. So you are cautiously optimistic,
I
right?
am.
Regarding the points that are there, 27, right? Out of which we are told that only one point remains. Is it regarding prosecution?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And prosecution, you must remember, is a tricky thing to persuade others because prosecution is something that is actually measured meaningfully over time. That you have made a certain number of prosecutions with certain sentences for a certain duration to certain people.
Right, right. And that might be the tricky bit because we cannot subject our legal process to external timelines. They have to be internally bound. Let me bring in Dr. Kausar, your take on FATF.
Thank you very much. I mean, two things. One is, if we see over the period of time, Pakistan has substantially improved. And this improvement has come in the form of recognition from the top international bodies. And of course, the FATF in their presses, in their statements as well. Of course, if we see, we have to contextualize it because the challenge to the Pakistan was huge. I mean, it was not something, I mean, we were gauged and assessed at a level which was a certain high level of standard, and that was set.
Okay.
So a country which is a developing country, not necessarily all the financial transactions are the things, those are geared towards certain, directions. But overall, when you operate in a certain financial system, of course, we need improvement. We accepted that. We took it as a challenge. And I guess this has also substantially improved our own image as well. If you see their report in February, which has come in, and quite recently as well, after that 31 recommendations, 40 they are saying, we are compliant and largely compliant on 31 or more than that. And 2 which they are saying are non-compliant, I mean, that deals with the other countries as well, I guess the relationship and the treaties and all that.
Yeah.
What we need to see is that, just one thing, what we need to see is that what we have gained also is very important. It will help improve our governance as well, international standing, international image, and of course it will also increase and enhance our global financial space as well in future.
Okay.
So that is one thing encouraging for us, and that's good for our own governance as well, improving governance the way we
Right.
anticipate. On the other side, of course, it comes with the challenges. It has political dimensions that we keep on reading, and people have been saying a lot as well. And that's, I guess, the part on the government as well, and our on community and civil society and the people, those who write and who write and those who have credibility as well, I guess, to write fairly about Pakistan. That Pakistan
Right.
is also a victim of, I mean,
right.
terrorism.
That is a good point, Dr. Saab, but you're giving me technical answers. Let me ask you whether it is a technical forum or a political forum.
See, if you see the recommendations, it has both legal and technical angles over there.
But how do you actually decide
So
whether you are compliant or not?
See, that's what I
In
want
the
to
end,
say.
you vote.
It has the political angle and dimension as well, which we are mindful of that. But the question is how to navigate and steer that. I guess one idea is that we have done everything and it's not going to happen. I guess the other area is that we still need to do more lobby and advocacy.
Yeah, lobbying is important, and we are going to talk about that. My concern is that one country that has been judging Pakistan is India, and India's current political party has an ideological, overhang that is called RSS, and RSS's own economics are not known. India's own economic dealings and wheelings, right? We don't have any clue about that. How is it that these countries can judge us while they themselves are broken to this level?
Absolutely, there is a question. I mean, this is another dimension on overall the efficacy of the system.
Politics.
See, but one thing, there is a political angle, that's what I am saying, but this same
Only
question
an
was...
angle, or the entire thing is
No,
political?
it is influential angle, I guess. It has effect, yeah.
And I'm going to actually talk about that later in the program as well. Let me bring in Ahmed Hassan Mughal Saab. Mughal Saab, as a representative of the business community, let me ask you, the journey so far, in the 3 years Pakistan has been on grade list, how it has affected Pakistan's business community, and do you think that being whitelisted is going to make any difference at all? Mughal Sahib, you'll have to unmute your mic. Mughal Sahib, if you can hear me, you'll have to unmute your mic so that we can hear your voice. There seems to be some technical problem. Let me come back to the studio. Same question to you, Dr. Chauhan. Is it a political body or a technical body?
It is both at the same time because it speaks in a technical and legalistic language.
Right.
About a
the
check-
answer is that it is Schrodinger's body then?
Yes,
Okay.
because until you look deep inside, it is dead and alive at the same time. So, but it has political machinations. It is subjective and objective at the same time. So it talks about systems being good and bad, but there are value judgments involved in terms of what is acceptable in monitoring and oversight and enforcement. Those things do involve value judgments because you cannot measure all countries equally. As you mentioned, India, for example, should be judged as harsh as us, and they would do much worse. Reason being, the absolute and relative size of their black economy is larger than ours in absolute and relative terms. And that subjectivity and objectivity is necessary for the jury of our peers in terms of evaluating one another's financial systems.
Right. So how did Pakistan end up on this list?
Well, all countries are monitored all the time,
Yeah.
and they do switch between lists. It's not just Pakistan, but you have two sets, I would say, of countries that come on the gray list. There's two countries on the black list, Iran and North Korea. That's an extreme.
They have been there for quite some time.
For a long time. But there's two sets of countries, I would say, come on the gray list off and on. They are small island countries that have large, oversized banking systems where there's a lot of money movement, like the Cayman Islands.
The shell companies and all.
Shell companies and all. And then there are developing countries which don't have a large formal sector. That includes us. But then there's also the issue of terrorism and what they describe as terrorism and counterterrorism coming in. That took precedence in the FATF after 9/11. It wasn't part of the original formulation in 1989. And so this became a vehicle for looking at terrorism and counterterrorism issues in countries.
Right. But my question was about the trigger. What actually triggered it? There must be a reason why all of a sudden the body decides that you have to end up on the gray list.
True. Well, this has to do a lot with the pressure coming from India and the United States on Pakistan that should not come in terms of kinetic actions, but should come in terms of hybrid actions. And economics is a field where you can trigger that. And 2018 was a time in the geopolitical arena where India particularly wanted to point the cannon at us.
Right. Dr. Kausar, again, can you enlighten us on the importance of the trigger that might have led us to this?
I guess given the two situations, I mean, one, of course, countries repeatedly are under that surveillance or maybe under that scrutiny, as they have stated earlier as well. When it comes to India, the question was there about India as well, that why are they not doing the same? So there was an answer from their rep that in future they will be going to monitor
this
that.
year they are going to be
Yes.
updated.
But
yeah, I know.
of course, there is one very important angle that we need to see, that in 2018 and then the overall situation of our region particularly. India, within that framework, if you see, they were planning, of course, something big in Kashmir, one. On the other side, of course, the Afghanistan still right now as it is, the situation was there as well. And of course, there was a lot of UN cry in the Western media as well about it. And then we have seen that. I mean, when it comes to India, I mean, there are two sets of argument. I mean, one is that, I mean, if this is very much justified, that this is to improve governance, maybe this is to improve the structures. But on the other side, if you use it for political purposes, this is very alarming
Right.
thing, because
And
this has impacted our regional.
And given that you keep on coming with the duality of answers, I'll have to come back to you. I'm told that Dr. Abid Qayyum Satleri joins us on telephone. Dr. Saab, thank you very much for your time. Let me ask you, how optimistic are you that Pakistan is going to come out of grey list during this plenary?
Well, Farooq, if the decision has to be made purely on technical grounds, that is the policy and procedures and on action plans, I would have been 100% optimistic that Pakistan would come out of grey list. But we know that it's not only the technical grounds, or it's not only the amendments in policies and procedures that would be actually the major determinants or the major decisive factors. Uh, we are already mindful of the fact that only last week there was a review of Asia Pacific Group online review, and the recommendation of that review would also be shared in the plenary. India was part of that reviewing countries, and so were Germany, France, United Kingdom, and China. So these five countries, they reviewed our policies and practices as part of Asia Pacific Group mutual evaluation. So those would also be shared. Now, in order to get out of this grey list and to get graduated into white list, the next step is that Pakistan would need a minimum support of one-third members who would be present in the plenary. It's a 39 members group. So let's say that if all of them they are present, so Pakistan would require 13 votes to get graduated to white list. In order to avoid a black list, Pakistan requires minimum 3 votes out of those 39, and those 3 votes are already secured. It is our 3-time tested friends, Turkey, Malaysia, and China. Now,
Right.
tomorrow it would depend whether we have the support from the 13 countries, and second, what sort of message would be provided by Asia Pacific Group to the FATF. So it is around 90% chances, according to my calculation. There's still 10% chances that we may be asked to still stay in the grey list until we complete the 27th action point as well.
Right. Dr. Saab, since you are talking about the voting process, let me actually take you a little bit back and ask you about the state of compliance. At this moment, because you observe and monitor all these compliance issues yourself as well, where are we at regarding the compliance, and what are the sticking points here?
You see, there were 3 types of things that Pakistan was required to do. One was to bring some sort of uniformity and harmonization on the key terms, money laundering and terrorism financing. So in the past, different financial institutions, they have different definitions of it. So one of the objection on us was that State Bank of Pakistan and many other law enforcement agencies, their definitions of money laundering and terrorism financing, those were different. So that Pakistan has already taken care of. The second was on non-financial institutions like money changers and jewelers and many other organizations which are not regular banks, but they deal with financial matters, regulating them and bringing them in some sort of scrutiny. That part is also taken care of. Third part was on enhancing restrictions on many of the groups which are designated as terrorist groups under different UN resolutions. That part is also taken care of. The only sticking point is about the successful level of prosecution, whether those who are being tried under the amended laws, whether they will get meaningful punishments or not. And in order to do that, Pakistan would require more time, because if a trial is taking place today, we need to give some sort of right to defend to the accused. And for any fair trial.
Dr. Saab, here's the fascinating part. I understand that FATF is an extension of the liberal world order, of the democratic system around the world. And while we keep on hearing that there should be emphasis on human rights and more transparent judicial system, on the other side, we are then going to be dictated about the timelines of individual cases as well. How does this work?
Well, of course, this is the economic coercion, or you can call it the use of economic coercion for statecraft. So many of the countries, in order to achieve their foreign policy objectives, they tend to use the institutions like FATF and IMF and World Bank and whatnot. So again, those countries who are not financially uh, self-sufficient or not financially independent enough, they have to unfortunately face economic coercion in this world. And Pakistan has shown consistently by improving its policy and practices that we are committed to basically remove any lacuna and any deficiency from our
Right.
policies and procedures on this effective execution, effective prosecution. Of course, we require time so that those who are accused under money laundering or accused under terrorism financing, they can be produced to the courts. Then courts, they would take their own time, and there is a court of law.
Right.
And
And
I
this
hope,
is what I was referring to, Dr. Saab.
yeah. So I hope
that
that
there seems to be some contradiction in their own value system. Dr. Saab, I was told that I will have to let you go early because you are busy. Thank you very much for being part of the program. Dr. Abid Qayyum Satlari Saab, thank you very much again for joining us. Let me come back to the studio. Dr. Chauhan, this contradiction is there, right? That on one side, you are supposed to believe in democratic principles, transparency of judicial system, and the right to defend yourself as well in a court of law. And then you are being asked that if you don't actually prosecute people, and quickly so, we are actually going to keep you in this doghouse. So how does this work?
Yes, I think you've pointed out an important paradox within the liberal world order and the idea of having societies go through due process. So on one hand, they do want us to have human rights and all of these things. At the same time, there is an exogenous imposition of how those things should be manifest. So their value judgment about the values that are exogenous to our cultural context.
Okay.
I think that's true. At the same time, there are some things like transparency that if we were to reflect within, we would also consider to be representative of our better outcomes, our greater good, which is that we should have an economy that is transparent, dynamic, and open. So there is part of what FATF tells us is from above and it's politicized. At the same time, there's something in having a dynamic system that is open and transparent that's in our own good as well.
Right, but this demand essentially comes from, regarding the prosecution, comes from Indian side, right? Is it true?
That's correct.
So when India is going to be audited, will we be allowed to judge it as well?
As a participant in this system, the FATF system, yes, we in theory would be, but not all voices
there
are
should be a
equal.
quid pro quo.
Yes.
Dr. Kauser, I'm going to come to you, and then I'm going to listen to the twin sets of arguments that you usually present. But I'm told that Mughal Saab has joined us again. Mughal Saab, I asked you about the experience of our business community during the time when Pakistan was on the grey list. Can you enlighten us, sir?
First of all, Mr. Safi, thank you for your time. What happened was when the FATF, Pakistan went to the grey list, and they were given a lot of conditions to comply with. It was usually mostly related to financial transactions. So you know that Pakistan is mostly a cash-based economy, and people are not willing to go into the banking system or go into the channels that are required by law. So what we saw was that people were not willing to put money to their accounts because they had to have a transaction, they have to have a history of transaction, and have to provide a source as well. So at that time, it was very difficult for the businesses to operate because usually, doing transactions was very difficult, and you have to provide a source, and what was the reason for your payment. So these kind of things were really that affected us as businessmen. So another thing was that it's been Pakistan has been it's more what the foreign minister already stated, that it's been a political issue as well. It's been lobbying done by India that has caused Pakistan to stay in the grey list. Although we've seen in all the past 2 years that there's been a lot of changes in law as well. and they want to have a trace of money, where the money is coming from, where it's going. So this was something that kept people from, using the banking channels, and you've seen that a lot of banks have suffered as well because during that time as well. So they were on one part they were blaming the government, current government, but you know that it has been very difficult to let's say that to document the economy, and what that was what the government has been trying to do in order to comply with the FATF requirements, the conditions that they wanted.
Right. Mughal sir, can you give us a estimate or a number as to how much a loss did it cause to our exchequer or our business community, this Pakistan being on the grey list?
I think it's very difficult to give an estimate, because a lot of transactions have not been through the formal channels. Before that's what used to happen was that the whole in an economy that is not documented, it's very difficult to give you an estimate. Maybe it's related to some of the company foreign direct investment that might have been affected as well, because what the biggest issue was that what was presented was that Pakistan is a country that is financing terrorists across the borders into Afghanistan, into India as well. So in that case, there's a lot of countries. India itself has been there's so many issues with them as well in terms of terrorist financing. There are some other neighboring countries as well. They have been, but it's very difficult. Maybe probably it has to be at least maybe more in a few billions as well. I think that in dollars, what I would say is that because it's very difficult to put in a number on that.
Right, but we have been told that there might be loss to the tune of multiples of billions of dollars.
Definitely,
so
definitely.
that is something. But Mughal Sahab, do stay with us. Let me come back to the studio. And Dr. Kausar, here's the thing. You and I, together in this program, many a times during Trump's tenure, we have bemoaned the collapsing liberal world order, and now it is being restored. And at this moment, it seems that you kept on rooting for something that might actually have double standards.
Yes, sadly, I mean, the way things are shaping up, particularly in our context when we're talking about FATF and other, I guess that's very sad part of it. I mean, these value systems, these all democratic liberal values and all these things should be, I mean, these should be universal in nature and should be equally, the spirit-wise should be applicable.
That's their appeal, actually.
Yeah. But if it's not happening, and then, there are repercussions. You have seen people getting divided, countries getting divided. Certain polls are, now new realignments are happening. Why? Because the countries on the other side of the same arguments that, there's no equal sort of treatment. The value system for you is different. The value system for developing countries is different. If you do not agree with my economic model, if you do not agree with my own system or culture, and then there is a strong resistance. So this sort of imperialism might not work. If it is working, it will create further problem to that. Even in FATF case, foreign minister said about India's role. I mean, this is very much obvious. It must be noted, I guess, that the way if you read their newspapers, if you see their channels, the way they are celebrating this Pakistan in it doesn't make any sense.
Do you watch their channels?
I mean, during that, if you see that...
I stopped actually watching them
if you see
when I realized it could affect my sanity.
It does now. Yeah. The question is, that's a fundamental problem. On the other side, there is a financial action task force monitoring finances, technical and all these reasons. On this liberal order, I mean, human value and human rights is also very much fundamental and very much important. The fundamental question is why not the same reaction when it comes to the human rights violations? I mean, UN has 2 reports on Kashmir, particularly on human rights and other. I mean, so we have to think the world which we are living is that we have to create a justice-based, a justified thing, so that there could be a coexistence and engagement possible.
Right. So at this moment, we have a hybrid system where on one side you keep on talking about universality of principles. On the other side, the bigger parties get the choking and bullying right within their own region. If India is bigger and influential, it can bully Kashmiris, it can bully Pakistan, it can do whatever it pleases to do with Nepal, Sri Lanka and other countries. Nobody is going to check that.
See, but one thing I see the other way around as well also.
Okay.
people been doing this, countries been doing this. But on Pakistan, I mean, I've just mentioned that we have losses in billions of dollars, as you said. But the question on the other side is this also gives you a chance to be more resilient. Pakistan have been progressing. Pakistan have been
that's a very sweet and
See,
positive spin.
because-
but let me tell
No,
you,
but just-
we have been tried every year
No,
for
ma-
past
ma-
74
but
years.
why not to appreciate our own institutional arrangements, the way we react it, the way we respond it more positively? That is one thing. On the other side, I mean, there was a question of isolating Pakistan, putting in blacklist and all that. It didn't happen. We have seen that continuous recognition from the international system that they're improving. So my understanding is if there would be that bullying and all these things, there is also reaction and response of the community, of the people particularly.
Okay.
And I guess if you see over the period of time, things are improving here as well. So this is an indication
but
to the
so
countries
far-
that this is
so
not
far,
way.
Dr. So far, the concern is that while we have been complying and incrementally our compliance has been there and it has been registered, for average Pakistani, it sounds like the curse of of Sisyphus, that you move up the boulder to the mountain's top, sleep, and then in the morning it is back where it started, right? Pakistan, till the time it doesn't come out of the grey list, it seems that Pakistan is stuck in a vicious cycle. Let me go back to Dr. Chauhan. Dr. Chauhan, one issue that we saw at the start of this entire story was Benami accounts, or the accounts which were anonymous accounts or fake accounts based on somebody else's CNIC number. Do you think that that problem has been fixed, and how so?
I would tell you that there's a lot of work being done on it, but Benami accounts actually reflect an asymmetry of power in our society. So you will have a powerful person and there's people under that person who are less powerful who become conduits for that. So I think that the bigger thing for us, even if on paper we are doing a good job, what really needs to be addressed is the asymmetries of wealth and power in our society in the longer run.
And while you're answering that, I was reminded of something else, that India's total bulk of Benami accounts is bigger than Pakistan's economy.
That's correct. That's how bad it is. That's right.
And yet it evades and it becomes the judge, jury and executioner, and we are perpetually on trial.
That's correct. But I think that India's reputation in these larger fora is being challenged by its poor performance, particularly this year with COVID. Its credibility in many things is being challenged. If you see it in the Quad, it's the weak link. You can say it's the sick man of Asia in a sense. And the governance and all those things make it seem like, well, maybe we shouldn't automatically listen to them or prop them up as much as a bulwark against China as they. So there are doubts coming in that will seep into elements just outside of public health, such as economics, going forward.
Yeah, you just brought up Quad. And just to borrow Harry Potter's terminology, it seems to be the come and go room, the room of invisibility, which comes and goes whenever it pleases. I don't know whether Quad is that big a dynamic right now. They haven't been able to deliver
correct.
on the vaccine.
True.
targets, right? But Mughal Saab, again, your community, how much cooperative it is right now regarding these reforms? Because these reforms, and while I can channel anybody and I keep on saying that Pakistan is being tried for the sake of trial, I understand that these recommendations are for our own good. So do you think that our business community, especially our traders, are going to cooperate with the government of Pakistan when it comes to compliance on these issues?
Definitely, there's a lot of people who have tried to comply with that. And, you see the whole system has changed. A lot of laws have been passed for the business securities. There is no other way, especially if you're an exporter. You have to go through the proper banking channels. A lot of people are into they are into now this whole system. It's the issue of, especially, the biggest problem is that it's what's the data, what is shared between probably our banks and the FDR as well. So that has been one of the primary reasons that people are not willing to go through the proper channel. There's been, I would say, that mistrust between the taxpayer as well as the tax collector. So people don't want to be, bullied by the FPR. Once, they get a notice, that's why there's so many transactions. Are you not paying your taxes properly? So these things need to be addressed on the simultaneously as well. That instead of the people who are putting money, who are employing people who are paying taxes directly and indirectly, those are the ones who are being probably harassed the most. So the government has to look into that as well. They have to give an incentive for people to be taxpayers. They have to be given incentive, that okay, this is how it's going to do, and this is the proper channel, and you have to go through that. If you're not going to do that, then what we've been seeing is that your banks have been really strict with a lot of their transactions.
Sorry to cut you. You said that there should be incentives. I understand that while we are talking about tax collection, there might be some concerns over there. But regarding compliance with law of the land and also getting documented, do you think that I need an incentive to comply with the law?
It's not about just about the incentive. It's just about the treatment that the taxpayer gets from the tax collector as well. If there is, it's very easy for a tax collector to come in, give you notice, seal your premises, close down your business, that, and give you, that this is the money that is owed. It should be a proper way of, handling tax collection. Why would you be willing to pay any taxes if you're not getting any kind of return from that? Instead of being, instead of going after those who are the ones who
not. And mind you, I'm not talking about tax collection right now. I'm talking about my right, my responsibility as a citizen and someone who operates within the Constitution, right? The concern is that regardless of the incentives, I am going to actually get my CNIC issued, right? Because that is my identity. Similarly, if I pay taxes or I indirectly pay taxes, I would like to have an NTN or some kind of economic identity as well. So, should there be incentives for such a thing, or should I actually be going for it because it is the right thing to do?
What I would, on the other side, you have to look at that the person who is in the tax net is the one who has to pay more taxes. There's a lot of data available for the government for the FBI to go after people who are not paying the taxes. It's very easy. It's not very difficult. I don't know why they don't have the capacity to go after people who are not paying taxes. You can go anywhere. See who was living in a big property, who has a big car. It's very easy. You can check there's data available for all the electrical meters as well. How are you able to afford this amount of how are you paying for this amount of electricity when you are not a filer? So you have to look at that as well. That it's easier to be not get into the audit for FBR if you're not a filer rather than someone who is a taxpayer. It's a possibility and a chance of him going into audit and being harassed by the FBR is much more for someone who's a taxpayer.
This is a serious concern, by the way, and let me come back to Dr. Kausar. Dr. Kausar, this seems to be a serious concern that if I'm going to be documented, invariably, I will end up paying more taxes because when you are on a list, the people who are going to collect taxes know where to go. Is there a possibility of creating two lists? One for the tax collection, the other one of the record of government of Pakistan that is needed for transparency that there is nothing wrong or fishy going on in the business community. For example, if I'm a foreign currency handler, right, and I have done exchange, and there, if I'm being documented by the FBR, then it is going to be to have different ramifications for me. But if the Interior Ministry has a record or NADRA has a record of what I do, that might not actually imperil my business.
See, actually, this is, of course, one of the angle which is an issue of governance internally, you see as well, because what we have seen that there are multiple organizations, institutions right now dealing with this. When you mention about Interior Ministry, they also might have this thing, and then the FBR and the other bodies. Right now, I guess there is a national committee that has been formed with the collaboration of different governmental institutions, including FBR and then FIA and
Why, you're talking about yesterday's developments.
Yes. So this is I mean, see, it must have some background, but of course you have to make it institutionalized. You have to make people understand why is all this happening,
Yeah.
and this is something for their larger benefit. And
Yeah,
s-
but
and then
my question is, who owns my data? Data is important, right? If I'm, you have my information, you're a friend, you're a colleague, I don't think I have to fear anything about it. But if this data reaches somebody who is actually a telemarketer, right? In the end, they will not let me sleep, right? Here's a concern. On one side, it is about law enforcement and transparency and not having any kind of illegal activity. On the other side, there are institutions which are supposed to collect funds from us. If my data ends up with them, I fear that perhaps my business is negatively going to be impacted. Every other day, I might have an audit. But transparency demands that I should have some kind of data available with the government of Pakistan that I am not doing any corrupting. You get that?
yeah, but my understand, I mean, there is, of course, there's a very genuine concern about the data protection, particularly, of course, and it has, of course, the legislation, the legislative part of it also should be very much strong that
Yeah.
the citizens have their own rights for their data protection as well. But on the other side, I guess, because these are just new arrangements in Pakistan, in a way
Yeah.
that the way the bodies have been created, the way they're getting the data, of course, it has certain perspective. I guess over the period of time, these things should be debated and institutionalized in a way that the trust of the people particularly should be restored. And that's
Right.
what we were listening the finance minister last time, that, you know, this environment of fear and all these things should go away. I don't know to what extent that they can do that.
Yeah,
But
at this moment, we are not talking about finance ministry, by the way. We are
but-
talking about FATF.
no, but
So
my
both are
understanding,
different stories.
but my understanding is it has to, you know, the trust factor has to be restored.
Right.
That's a
That
fundamental
that will happen as we move forward. But very quickly, in conclusion, optimistic or not
Yes.
this time?
Even if we are not, but we have progressed a lot.
Yeah, but that is not the answer I was looking for. I wanted to know whether we are going to come out of the list or not. So that's basically, technically, very shyly a no. Not optimistic.
Not very much.
Right. Dr. Chauhan, you want to conclude as well, and you can add once again whether you're optimistic this time or not.
I
But
am-
a solid yes or no.
I'm cautiously optimistic, but I veer towards optimism because of the progress we've made. But we must always keep in mind the politics is different from the technicalities, and we have to battle in both spheres.
Okay. And we don't have that kind of punching power for politics?
We are doing our best, but it's a big world out there. It's
Okay, okay. Mughal Sahab, your conclusion and whether you're optimistic or not.
I would say that I'm like 60% optimistic that we'll get out of the gray list, but still, 60% is still more than half, so I would go with that.
Okay. Do you think that there is any need for improvement regarding compliance in Pakistan? I want this to be your conclusion.
It's not about, Pakistan made a lot of progress in the last couple of years, and there's been so many laws passed, and they've tried in this short span of time, an economy that is not documented, and it's been very difficult for the government as well. But with the efforts that Pakistan has put in, I think they should be at least out of 26 out of 7, they've gone through past those requirements. So I think they should come out of the grey list, but I think it's still more political than it is related to the technical side.
Right. On that note, Mughal Sahab, I'm told that we have to conclude the program. Thank you very much for your precious time. Dr. Usman Chauhan, thank you very much for your precious time. Dr. Waqas Kausar, always a great pleasure having you in the studio as well. Viewers, you have listened to our participants. There is a lot of skepticism, even though everybody keeps on talking about optimism. But we are a nation of skeptics, and that actually shows as well. But the concern here is simple. Usually, whenever you talk about any institution in the world order which claims to be liberal and democratic, there is supposed to be some measure of collective security and some measure of justice as well. And usually that means that if you want to, if you are on a mission to civilize, then you are supposed to have carrots and sticks. Pakistan has this weird luck that every time we end up with more sticks than carrots, and that has been happening for quite some time. But at this moment, because the world is in a flux, and because everybody's opinion and every country's a state of affairs actually matters, if there are going to be double standards, and we have cited clear examples where rules might be more broken than Pakistan, and despite that, they get whatever they want. If Pakistan is going to stay in the grey list prison for any longer, it is going to have a very negative impact on Pakistani opinion of the world order, and in the end, world order as well. So let us hope in coming days we see some kind of respite, because usually, remember what we have seen on 1/6 in America, what we have recently seen in Israel as well, and other countries. One thing is for sure: no institution can be taken for granted, and it is in the interest of every institution to preserve the image. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.